Back to the question about how company culture possibly influenced how you were treated.
I have actually thought back on the experience that I had, and part of me wondered whether or not the manager even noticed the treatment that I got, because like I said, I told Melis, I was talked about. I remember hearing them talk on the other side of the bar saying, oh, she's not doing her job right. She needs to be fired. Now, if another coworker made that mistake, they'd laugh it off, they'd forgive them. I even remember when I finally told them I was leaving, one of the managers said, oh, is everything all right? And I said, well, this coworker has been giving me a hard time. And the manager kind of gave him like a slap on the wrist. And it was very obvious that it was a slap on the wrist. So all of those months of being antagonized, some days where I think I even remember crying at work, it very much felt like the managers, whatever little they saw, they knew about, and they didn't bother doing anything because they just felt that, one, it could have been because I was new. They just felt like, oh, well, she's automatically at fault. But two, they didn't think about the fact that, oh, well, this coworker actually does have a bias. And that was even more hurtful, knowing that you really were alone in that fight and you kind of just had to grit your teeth and bear it. Company culture makes a difference, because if they had sat him down and threatened to fire him, he would have stopped, because the manager was his girlfriend's mother. Yes, manager was his girlfriend's mother. So if she said—
Talk about nepotism.
Right? So he would have stopped if she said anything, but she didn't say anything. Yeah, so I think culture does make a difference. Company culture makes a huge difference. Minority groups have to know that the company they work with is not that we expect you to take our side all the time, but look at it objectively. Do you understand? Look at it objectively and use empathy and consider, okay, if I was in their position, how would I feel being this and this and this? Like, that compassion and that empathy it just tends not to be there from my experience.
And I think also to add to that, to someone who may not be able to empathize with that experience, I don't know how, but also maybe to look at how the situation could look like. You know, like how some people like say, well, I wasn't being racist, or I wasn't being colorist, or I don't have a racial bias, but also recognizing how the situation could look, even if perhaps mistreating the only Black woman in the workplace isn't you mistreating her because she's Black, but also recognizing that that is how it could look. Curious if Arabi, Melise, or Naziat, if you guys were also minority women in the workplace as well, the management were they majority male, and if do you think that also maybe contributed to your experience?
It's interesting. It's very interesting. In some places, I was definitely not the only woman. You know, there was definitely this, I think a lot of it had to do with dress code. I think a big portion of company culture is dress code, and how you socialize and how you interact. And of course, me being the person that I am, where I come from, I don't drink. That was something that caught people's eye. Like, I don't drink, but you know, they drink to socialize. That's one separate piece. And then, you know, they tell us to dress, you know, appropriate, dress modestly, dress appropriately. And when I did dress modestly and appropriately, it was like, oh, you're just doing a lot. You're just, I wouldn't show my knees, or, you know, I would wear pants, and then I would wear like maybe a blazer, like a suit.
Your modesty is too modest?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's definitely there.
Okay.
Modesty is too modest, you know, not fun enough, not drinking enough, even though these are, you know, the upper management, the CEO of that one particular company I worked in, she was a woman. It's not only, I don't think it's only about, you know, having these, you know, white men, right, in those upper management positions. It's also about being women being in those upper positions and passing on those concepts, that kind of culture onto their employees. So that really baffled me. I've definitely worked in institutions where there were men who were vice presidents and whatnot, but I've never felt, it's interesting, I've never felt like out of place or like I don't belong when I worked under men. Apart from, you know, men, certain directors or vice presidents trying to micromanage or whatnot, I've never felt uncomfortable. I can say that. I've never felt uncomfortable around them. But in that one particular company, it was just like, from the way I dressed, the way I smelled, to what I drank or didn't drink, or just going to outings. I think that culture, that kind of company culture definitely impacted me. And I transitioned into an organization that didn't have drinking, because they were a substance abuse treatment program, and they did not promote drinking, even in like social parties, like work parties. They did not promote that. It was interesting. I think as I transitioned in my career, I think I've become more comfortable with who I am in the workplace. And, you know, if people have questions, they can definitely ask me. I'm open to it. And then I use those opportunities to educate rather than take it offensively, because in the past I would be baffled and take it offensively, and like, what is this? So yeah, definitely company culture matters. I think favoritism and nepotism are also things to look out for in a company culture. I've also worked in a company where everyone, the CEO and other associates, were family, but I don't think it impacted me as drastically as that one particular company. It really depends on where you go, and I think it also depends on what your employer's expectations are of you, and if they respect you as who you are, if they respect diversity. I think those are things to look out for.
That's actually very interesting, hearing that, like you said, you never really felt uncomfortable around the men, because I was on sets and projects with white male students. And I remember one time I had a fellow student, we were filming, and he had me in front of the camera, and he said, okay, let's shine the camera on that pretty brown skin, that buttery brown skin. I mean, and I sat there, and the other black girl in the group, like, looked at me, and I looked at him, and I looked at her, and it was just like really uncomfortable. We had another classmate who, again, it was mostly female, and one other white guy. So it was two white guys in the group, and he only listened to the other white guy in the group. When we tried to give suggestions and say, can you turn the camera this way, turn the light this way? I mean, he would just shut you down, and he would do what he wanted. And then we got C's on our projects, and everything the professor said that we should have done, we were suggesting, but he wouldn't listen. So that has been my experience. And I've had to balance that, being gentle and being patient and being very firm and snatching people by the collar, not literally, of course, but metaphorically, working with men. I've had to be very no nonsense. That has been my experience.
If you are the only one from your either racial background, ethnic background, then you have to have more boundaries, because people are coming to you and with these comments and in these situations that you don't know where it is coming from. A lot of the time, I found myself sometimes paralyzed, because you walk into a situation and suddenly someone tells you something that you don't expect, right? And it tells you this harsh reality, how you always have to have this like a boundaries, otherwise you've been brought into very different situations. And that also tells that this is not fair, right? Because this doesn't have to happen in this way, but it also tells us about the importance of the organizational culture, because the organizational culture definitely shapes the structure as well.
Just to businesses and companies in general, how can they make the company culture more suitable and welcoming, and therefore more productive?
Trainings, definitely promoting trainings on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've recently heard about these trainings where employers, they acknowledge your difference. On LinkedIn, I saw a post where Amazon, there was a worker who was observing Ramadan, he was fasting, and so Amazon sent him a gift card for the holidays. So little things like that make a difference. I'm not saying it has to be grand and huge, but little things like that, little perks here and there. And then also just having trainings on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think those trainings really matter, not only like treating our customers with integrity and respect, but also treating each other as coworkers with integrity and respect.
The ability to offering a safe space for an employee to come to you and say, hey, I've been having this problem, knowing that they have someone they can go to and talk to, because it's one thing to encourage diversity and open conversation out in public, but when someone is actually in trouble and is having a problem and they want someone to talk to about it, is there someone they can go to who will actually handle the situation, and how will it be handled? Is it someone who will be, like I said before, empathetic, who will kind of say, okay, I can see how from their perspective they see this. Let me go and talk to this person. Because if you know that there's not going to be any consequences, should you encounter any problems, you're not going to even bother saying anything.
So these are all wonderful suggestions, and I would also add that it is very important to increase the diversity in the institution as well, because when it comes to especially higher education, I always feel like we are not diverse as we should be. So there's always diversity courses in the institutions, or there are always diversity training. But when it comes to the faculty and staff, I always feel like we are not very diverse, and it is very critical, and it's very important, especially for the students' perspective, and for students who don't really live in the diverse communities. So university and colleges are very important for them, because so that they can expose some sort of diversity.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for sharing your experience. This has been our first Fireside chat. Thank you so much to Rabi, Melise, and Naziat. Thank you. This is the end of our conversation. Thank you guys for watching. If you made it to the end of this video or video clip, follow us on Instagram, FIER Atlanta on our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. And we hope you guys enjoyed this conversation, and thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye.